Well, hello, everyone. I am Ben Holmes. I'm a full stack developer currently working at Peloton, do a lot of Jamstacky stuff, do a lot of front end stuff. And this is my first time giving any talk ever. So be, a little polite in the private and public Zoom logs, So I guess I'll share my screen here. Kind of have some scrappy notes of what we're going to try to outline in this talk here. So we're going to run down everything about sort of how image optimization works and how Eleventy can help you accomplish that. First, we're going to go through why image optimization is so important anyways, some of the performance benefits you can get, accessibility benefits, all those sorts of things, and kind of at least how Eleventy image impacted my own blog. And then how the picture element works. I think it's really worth sort of clarifying how the picture element is actually constructed so you know what these images are and how to debug them. And the last thing is about the Eleventy image plugin, the world famous one that helps you accomplish all of these tasks. And then some more advanced use cases of how you can optimize any image without even using shortcodes. So I will just jump in here, starting with why image optimization is important. This is a snippet from my personal blog post about this subject. I'll probably link it out in like extended resources at the end here. But this is a screenshot of how my article looked when I ported it directly from Dev2. As part of like a big migration to self-host my blog, I basically copy pasted all the markdown files out of Dev, put them into a Eleventy site and just said, let's see what happens. And the answer is a lot of the images were blown up and very large from whatever Amazon buckets they were using. And I ended up with all of these guys that took my load time all the way up to 10 seconds in the worst case, according to Lighthouse, which is not very good. And you can see here a lot of potential savings that it's highlighting for me. Some of these images all the way up to 763 kilobytes. It's almost a megabyte just for the banner image. So this is actually very easy to optimize with Eleventy image because as we'll explore, Eleventy will also take in absolute URLs. So even though these images are hosted somewhere else, Eleventy will go download them all for me, optimize them, and let me use them in my site. So this is the Lighthouse score that I'm getting right now after I just plugged in the Eleventy image plugin. And there's one image I forgot to optimize in my footer, but otherwise that 10 seconds turned into 1. And the only savings left are a couple kilobytes that I could get on the WebP. I could probably go performance splunking to figure out how I could do better there. But I'd say this is a great score considering where I was before. And we can see everything's all in the greens now. So that's kind of the impact that I wanted to highlight. And the main things that it'll help you with is serving the right formats. You may have noticed here, these are all JPEGs, but these days WebP and AVIF are really popular formats for getting smaller images. So Eleventy will help you with that. The other thing is serving the right size, of course. If you're on mobile, you should get a smaller image than you do on a big desktop site. And loading at the right time. This is something Eleventy will also help you with if you want to attach a little lazy attribute to your images. So they only load when you scroll to them, which is really helpful. And I also mentioned including alt text. Eleventy fails on purpose if you don't include alt text for your images. So now you get a nice error in your console when you know it's not accessible. I think that's a nice little win on their examples. So that's everything there. In order to explore how the picture element works, if y'all know me, you know I like to do things with whiteboards. So instead of sharing a screen, can y'all see this board here? Yes. Good. Awesome. And yes, I did draw a possum in the corner. But anyways, this is sort of an anatomy of how a picture element actually works. So this is the element that Eleventy is going to insert for you. If you pass it an image URL, it will spit out a picture element with all of the formats and sizes generated for you. A picture element has a few attributes. The first one is all of the sources that you want for your picture. Like if you want to have a few sizes in WebP and a few sizes in JPEG to help people on older versions of Safari. That's really the use case for JPEGs these days. That's what a picture element will help you do. You just say source type, whatever it is, and then all of the sizes that you offer and when to apply those sizes. And that's what source set is doing here, where we can imagine Eleventy took in an image called maybe chunk.webp, and then it spit out versions at 500 pixels, 800 pixels, 1200, and 2000. And we can tell the browser, this is the grab bag of sizes that you can choose from. Here's how wide they all are. And now I'm going to give you a rule set So you can decide which sizes to apply and when. And I wanted to go over the sizes attribute in particular, because that's kind of the harder part to understand when it comes to picture elements. So I had like a little example down here of some use cases that you might have, where on a website, you might start with a mobile view. It could be 320 pixels wide, for example, and all of your images just take up the full width of the screen. A list of thumbnails, pretty common territory there. And then you may have that layout change for tablet users, where you have sort of a fold out menu, and then the images are only taking up about half of the viewport. So you want to use the right image size for that half viewport size instead of the full. And then on desktop, you might have like a maximum width that says all images are going to be 1200 pixels wide. That's my rule. Even if your desktop is some 5K display that's super wide, an image is going to be 1200 pixels, and that's the size that I want to use. So I guess just to explore how that would get applied, the first example I wanted to run through here is the mobile use case, which is you have an image. It's always going to be the size of the viewport. How do you tell the browser, use the right image from this set for that given screen size? So you do that using basically a media query is what this is. So right now I have written down 100 VW, which means take the width of the viewport and then use that to figure out which of these to apply. So it'll take 100% of the screen, which is 320, and then it'll match it up with a number that best fits 320. So in our case, 320 is a very small number. So if we were on like a 1 DPI screen, it would take the 500 width image because that's the smallest one. It's the quickest to load. So that's what it's going to go and grab. And I do want to bring up DPIs as well. Sorry to introduce some more monkey wrenches here. But the first thing that you need to consider with sizes is the pixel density of that screen. So it's easy to think about it when it's 1, which means 1 pixel is 1 pixel all of the time. So 320 is going to match up with an image that's roughly 320 pixels wide. If your DPI is higher, which could be like, I'm on a 4K display, I'm on a Retina display, and everything is blown up to match this super nice pixel size, we could say your DPI is 2, for example, where if you're on a 320 pixel wide screen, that actually translates to 2 times 320, so 640 pixels wide. So that means that this is actually going to become 640 pixels wide on mobile because it's a really high resolution screen. And it's going to reach for the next thing that matches that. So in our case, 320 is going to match up to 500, and 640 is going to match up to 800 because that's the next size of images. And then we can go a little bit further and talk about different screen or different sizes for our images in the viewport. Like on tablet, for example, we see that the image is not taking up 100% of the viewport. It's now taking up, say, 60% of the viewport. So we need some way to tell the browser, okay, take 60% of the width of the screen and match that up with an image that roughly matches that size. So we could say, if this is 760, maybe 60% of that is like 400. So we could say, in a sort of media query format here, we could say, when we're on a screen that has, this is really hard to write, by the way, minimum width of, we said 400, so that's what I will write. Then we want to take this size, or sorry. This is what we would change our size attribute to. What this means is when we are on a screen that's 760 pixels wide or higher, I want you to take 60% of the screen to figure out the image to use. Otherwise, fall back to this. So it's basically a way to match up your CSS media queries with which images the browser is going to use. So in our example here, 320 is below this breakpoint. So it's going to use 100 width of the screen, which we said is roughly 640. And then it's going to match that up with 800 width. And then when we hit this breakpoint, it's going to take 60% of the width of the viewport, which is going to be about 400 pixels wide. So that's going to match up with either this one or this one, depending on your DPI. So there's a lot of factors to consider. I think I've overwhelmed y'all with details, but the main thing to take away here is that you can use media queries to say, what portion of the screen do I use to figure out the image size? And you need to think about DPI when you're choosing the sizes that you generate. It's very easy to say, like, I'll never need an image that's wider than 800 pixels because I have like a viewport that's never wider than 800. But for high resolution users, you actually need something that's 1600 pixels wide, double, in order to match the DPI that they're using. So a lot of details there, but does anyone have any questions about like how you would choose the attributes for a picture element?
Ben, question, for the sake of large screens with retina displays, how high would you go? I'm fearing there's going to be a massive image.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it depends on how you're breakpointing those images. So in this example here on like desktop, I would recommend having some sort of maximum width that says, even if my desktop is 10,000 pixels wide, images will never go wider than 1200. And then you would be able to say something in here, like on my desktop breakpoint, just use the actual hard-coded width of 1200 pixels.
Right. In other words, you're not, because I thought for a minute you were going to say, and for 2400 width retina, you should go 4800. Okay, so you're not saying it. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, when you hit a maximum width, just tell it, use this number every time. I don't care the width of the screen. Just match it up.
Thank you.
That would be my recommendation. Because I also have an auto setup where it's like, I generate up to 4000, but I'm smart enough to say, don't grab those ever if it doesn't make sense. Yeah. Okay, any other questions about this?
Is there any way to avoid the media queries if you have like an explicit image size? Like you always say it's 300 by 200, and then you don't have to worry about all that, you know, figuring out the layout and the screens and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, if you always know the width of your element, you almost don't need the picture at all because you don't want any fallbacks. You would just say image source equals this one size, and then that's kind of it. But if you do want it for fallbacks like WebP and JPEG, I just realized it's in this case, you could say something like, instead of using 100 VW, just make this 300 pixels and don't use any other media queries.
Okay.
Just say like sizes 320.
Pixels. Okay. Gotcha. All right. So that could be, you still want to have the same, like, so for 300 pixels, you still want to have like a 600 pixel image and maybe a 900 pixel image or something like that, right?
Yeah, for DPI requirements. On my like MacBook, my DPI is roughly like 2.5. So I actually need something that's like 800 pixels if it's 300 wide or something like that. The math works out kind of weird, but yes, good question.
I'm basically doing 3 sizes right now. It kind of covers everything.
Yeah, 3 is usually a safe number.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Cool. Anyone else? Because I do have a little demo to get to here. Okay, cool. Well, thus concludes whiteboarding session. I will now share my screen again. Is this the right screen? Actually, it is not. Hang on. Cool. Do y'all see this talk.md still?
Yep.
Got the one? Cool. Okay, so now I'm going to walk through how the heck you could use the Eleventy image plugin to actually apply all of this stuff. We're running a little short on time, so I won't go super in depth, but I'll just show you how the Eleventy image plugin works for anyone that's unaware, and then show you a really interesting use case of like not even using shortcodes, just optimizing images automatically, depending on tags that are applied to that element. So what I'm going to do is jump over to the Eleventy image docs here. This is available on the Eleventy site itself, and you can just install the plugin from here. It's just Eleventy image. And then you can sandbox this really easily. It's just a node script at the end of the day. So you don't even have to put this inside of an Eleventy config. Like in this example, I just created a script.js file, and I'm just gonna run it using Node. I'm not gonna do anything else. And this is the output that it'll give you. It will take in that image, which is from Unsplash, it goes ahead and fetches it and then generates images locally that match what was on that URL, which is really great for migrating blog posts from somewhere else. And it'll generate all of the sizes that you specified with all of the formats. And here we're just console logging everything that it generated, but we also have the option of turning that into some HTML that we can use in our website itself. So if I just copy this guy directly, or I actually have a ready-made example. If I move my Zoom toolbar, okay. Heading over here. This is a more full example where we would apply the alt text that we want for that image, the sizes attribute that I just explained. You may generate these using shortcodes, or you may just have a hard-coded one for a given layout. And then the loading strategy, lazy means it'll load once you scroll to it. You can also use eager if it's a banner image, which I would recommend. And then decoding, I just use this default one to match up with lazy. You can use synchronous as well. And then it'll just go ahead and generate a picture element for us. And we get this console output here. So it created a picture element. It created a few source entries, one for our WebP, and then another one for our JPEGs. And then it'll apply all of the widths that the browser has access to, along with our sizes. So really useful tool. And the one thing I'll say is that the source order matters. Like if you really wanted to use WebP, make sure WebP is on top of JPEG in the list. Otherwise, it'll still apply JPEG, even if that image is bigger. So be a little careful with that. But otherwise, it's pretty straightforward to use. And as you could imagine, since we can take in a source and alt text and spit out a picture element, we can make a very simple shortcode that does this for us. So they have an example of that here, where they literally just take in a function, you can pass it a source, and it'll spit out a picture element on the other side, which is really nice if you want to write out your shortcodes manually. But if you're in the same situation that I was, you probably don't want to do that for all of them. And that's because, well, I'll go to an example with some images here. This is the format that you would write images in Markdown. And if I were to replace this with the shortcode, I would have to use like %image, move the source over to here, and move the alt text into there. And then I would have to use my sizes attribute. It's a full scale refactor for every image on my site, which you can write a bash script to do. It's pretty quick, but it's not super great if you're cross-posting stuff really often. Like if you're in my situation, you write your blog post in here, and then you want to go post it on Dev2, and you have to do a find and replace on all of your shortcodes. And then you make an edit to one of the images. You have to find and replace again every time you republish. It's a lot to go back and forth, in my opinion. So I set up a little way to locate all of the like vanilla image tags inside of my Markdown files and turn those into picture elements in line. So I don't have to write shortcodes myself. So that's a little demo that I will show off here. And this is actually using a brand new feature in the latest Eleventy Canary that Zach just merged in this weekend. So I'm able to show you this demo, which is very nice. So it's pretty simple to set up here. I will go ahead and just run this site first to give you all a little context on what this demo is doing. So I've spun it up here. All it's going to do is make sure all of the images that Eleventy generates get copied to my build and copy over some styles that I have applied. I haven't done anything else. And if I head over to 8080, I should be able to see one of my blog posts here. And I'll remove this, but it's just going to spit it out normally. And because we haven't optimized our images, we see it's just creating the regular image source. It's not generating multiple sizes. This 700 by 433 might not be the best size on mobile, for example. So we're going to set something up to go find all of our images. And before I jump in, I do want to say Jquery warning ahead. If y'all are afraid of Jquery, you may need to turn back now, hide your children. It's not safe for work. But if you're okay with this, keep watching the stream. It shouldn't be too much of a problem. In short, we're going to be using a little node library that uses Jquery syntax to read in some HTML, replace our images with picture elements. That's it. There are other libraries to do this, but Jquery made it easier. I hate to say it, but Jquery is kind of good sometimes. Anyways, here is the syntax that we're going to explore. So if y'all are unaware, Eleventy has launched a cool little feature that lets you add extensions that it's able to process. So like if I wanted to process JSX or something, I could add it as an extension and tell it how to process that sort of file. Another feature that was added though, is the ability to override existing extensions. So for example, if you don't like Markdown it, and you want to use your own Markdown library, it's possible now. You just have to say, Markdown compiles in a different way. Here's what I'm going to do. And we're not going to do anything fancy like that. We're just going to use this to take in all of our processed Markdown and then reformat it with our image plugin. So a couple parameters I need to pass. I need to tell it to read all of the content, like so. And there is a two-step little rendering process here where Eleventy will compile your template, which means sort of applying all shortcodes and doing all of that work. And then the second step is actually rendering it with the data that was passed down with front matter or whatever else. If you've used the data cascade, that's what this is here. It's the God object. And we want a way to first do what you are normally going to do. This is available using the default renderer property, which says, go process Markdown how you normally would. And I can just return that straight up, and we will basically have the same behavior we normally would. And then in the middle here, we're going to process that HTML and do some cool stuff to it. So in my setup, for example, I may want to apply some image settings depending on the tag that is applied to that markup. And for my blog, all of my blogs are tagged with the tag of blog. So if I have some settings for images that I want on everything tagged as blog, but I don't want it like messing with my homepage images, for example, I can go ahead and just look at that God object, look through the tags and say, okay, is it a blog post? Well, here's how I want to process the images for that blog post. And I will sort of copy these over from a ready-made example I have over here, because I will mess up jQuery syntax if I'm not careful. But we're going to await a bunch of promises, basically. We're going to, well, I forgot this step first. We need to process using jQuery, basically. It's called the Cheerio library. And what we're going to do are these steps. One moment. And my ESLint's been on the fritz, but this is basically what it is. We look for all of the images in our HTML first. Then we look for all of the image attributes on that image. So the source and the alt text mainly. I have a default value for sizes, which maybe I have a set of sizes that I use for every blog post. So I can just put that here. And then I convert it to an optimized image. And I'm just going to use the shortcode that Eleventy has on their docs. This is literally just a function that takes in all those parameters, spits out the optimized one as we just demoed in that script tag. And then it will replace all of the images with the optimized one. Very readable little solution here. And then at the end, just make sure we use the output of our jQuery-ish function. So that's everything. And we should see it suddenly finds all of our images across all of our blog posts, magically processes them in the image directory here. These are a few of them, for example. And then if we head to our page, we should find, if we're lucky, that it set up a picture element for us with all of those image sizes. So real simple script here. And it allows us to be really careful about how we're optimizing our images and where. Because now that we have access to the data object, we can do it by tags, we can do it by title, we can do pretty much anything we want in order to change the setup that we use on a given blog post. So I personally really like this for my personal blog. It gives me a lot of flexibility over like which size attributes I apply depending on the tags that exist on a template. And as you can imagine, because this is very reusable, we could add the same exact extension to Nunjucks or to HTML or to Liquid. We could add it anywhere that we want. So that is my flexible little solution to this, this sort of problem. And that's kind of all I wanted to share, was this way to optimize your images without even using a shortcode. But does anyone have any sort of closing thoughts or questions about what I've presented here today? Yes, no?
Hey, do you handle, are your built image files in the repo, or do you refetch and regenerate them all on every build?
It's a good question. There's one thing that I missed, which was the .cache. So Eleventy generates a cache entry for every image it generates. So like if you're fetching these from absolute URLs, like they're all on Unsplash and it downloads them, then this is a way to say, don't rebuild them. If you're on a Netlify setup, for example, and you want to make your deploys quick, need to host these. Oh, the recording kind of messed there. But yeah, you kind of have the option of either pulling them all in at build time and sort of putting the image directory in your output. Like that's one option. So you don't have to store any of them in your repository. You just tell Eleventy, go fetch images from here and then put them in my build. Your other option is to host them all on the repo itself, which would speed up local builds, for example.
But the local cache thing does not work with the local images, correct?
I believe it does. I think it just caches them if you're using incremental builds. So if you save a change to an image, it's not going to reprocess every image all at once. But from my experience, it does reprocess all of your images when you kill the server and restart it. I think I just need to mess with my cache duration settings, which they do have documented here. But this is the one part that I really want to explore, because every time I open up my site, I have to wait 1 to 2 minutes for everything to process before I can start working. And that's not a great experience. I think it's just these cache options I need to mess with, but it does work for local.
Same here, thank you.
Yeah. Okie doke.
Awesome. Well, why don't we all give Ben a hand? Thanks so much. And you're also on Twitter and in Discord too. So if folks have more questions afterwards, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I guess I can plug myself here over on Ben Holmes Dev. This is me. Go follow here or DM me or anything. I'm mostly working on this little project for setting up React in Eleventy projects. Didn't really talk about that at all today, but if you're interested in that sort of thing, definitely reach out. And for image optimization, I'll try to share some resources after this.